Hello, my name is Paul K. Chappelle. I am the Executive Director for the Peace Literacy Institute, and today we will be talking about the skills for building shared trust. And before we talk about the skills for building shared trust, I'd like to share a story. So I have a friend I still talk to from high school. He and I went to high school in Alabama together, and he still lives in Alabama. And when I left the Army, I went to visit him in Alabama where he still lives. So I arrived there on a Friday evening. Him and his friends wanted to go out drinking that evening. I don't drink alcohol, but I went out with them to be social. And at around 2 in the morning, they all wanted to go to a Waffle House. Everybody was drunk. And in Alabama, that's where drunk people go at 2 in the morning when they're hungry. And that doesn't only happen in Alabama, by the way. So we go to this Waffle House at 2 in the morning. I'm probably the only person at the Waffle House who isn't drunk other than the workers. And there's a guy in a corner yelling at this waitress. He's yelling at this waitress because she just brought him his food and he has a dirty fork. And he's screaming at her, yelling at her, my fork's dirty, my fork's dirty. Give me a clean fork. I want a clean fork. She doesn't have a clean fork for him immediately. So he walks across the Waffle House, takes my fork out right in front of me, goes back, sits down, starts eating. So I'm looking at the menu. I haven't ordered my food yet. The waitress saw what happened. Within 30 seconds, she gave me a brand new fork, so I'm not too worried about it. So my friend's friend is sitting next to me, and he gets really, really angry. He goes, "That guy just took your fork." And I go, "Yeah, but now he has a fork. I have a fork. Everybody has forks. Everything's fine." So my friend's friend is still getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I say, "Look, I appreciate you trying to defend my honor, but he didn't take my wallet. If he took my wallet, I'd have to give my wallet back. And what he did was wrong. He shouldn't have taken my fork. But when people are drunk, they make bad decisions and you can't reason with them. So he's over there minding his own business. He's really drunk. He didn't take my wallet. I think we should just leave him alone." So my friend's friend is getting angrier, angrier, angrier. Finally, he goes, "I'm not going to take this." He goes over, he starts screaming in the guy's face. He goes, "He's a veteran. You can't take his fork." So I haven't drunk any alcohol, so I'm looking at everything very rationally. And first of all, the guy who took my fork is physically massive, very large, muscular human being. And I've done martial arts for a long time. Martial arts teaches that just because people are big doesn't mean they can fight, but it is something to think about. And it's a dangerous situation. There's four men. He's with a group of three other men. It's a group of four men at a table together. And the guy sitting next to the guy who took my fork, the guy sitting next to him, has this big chain around his neck, like a Home Depot chain. So I realize there's about to be a fight. I go over there. I calm things down a bit. I bring my friend's friend back. And the guy with the chain comes over and apologizes. He goes, "I'm really sorry. My friend's drunk, doesn't know what he's doing. Let me apologize by paying for your meal." So he actually paid for my meal to apologize for his friend. Very kind thing for him to do. Now, the reason why I tell you that story is because there was almost a mini war started just over people feeling disrespected. That's all that that was about. Everybody had food. Everybody had forks. Nobody's personal property was taken. That was all about people feeling disrespected. My friend's friend felt disrespected because my fork was taken and I'm a veteran. And the guy who took my fork, he felt disrespected because he had a dirty fork and he was being yelled at. So there's a reason why martial arts teaches you to always respect everybody, including your opponent. The reason why martial arts teaches you to always respect everybody, including your opponent, is because the vast majority of human conflict comes from people just feeling disrespected. Think about all the times in your life when you most wanted to punch somebody or yell at somebody. It's probably because you felt disrespected in some way. So martial arts teaches that the best self-defense isn't punching or kicking. The best self-defense is to go through life conveying respect to everybody. If you convey respect to everybody, you not only dramatically reduce conflict in your life, but when you do have conflict, which you will eventually, you dramatically improve your capacity to resolve conflict. So how do you convey respect? It's not something that we're taught in our society. At least many people are not taught how to. So to talk about this further, let me pull up this slide. And I'll get my video up in a second. Just to quickly review, most conflict comes from people feeling disrespected. Even in conflicts over territory and resources, feelings of disrespect are almost always intertwined, which makes it much more difficult to solve those conflicts over territory and resources. If you look at military history, for example, you see feelings of disrespect intertwined in conflicts over territory and resources. So learning to convey respect is critically important. So how do humans convey respect? Let me get my video back up here. So you first have to understand different cultural norms. What's considered respectful in one culture might be considered disrespectful in another culture. But there are 3 skills that convey respect in all known cultures. The first skill that conveys respect in all known cultures is listening. So think of it like this. In all of human history, I don't think anyone has ever seriously said, I hate it when people listen to me. I can't stand it when people listen to me. Nobody ever says, me and my spouse have to go to marriage counseling. My spouse listens to me all the time. I can't take it anymore. Now, there is a difference between listening and eavesdropping because listening implies consent. But when people consent, they like to be listened to. So all known cultures find listening respectful, and all known cultures find not listening disrespectful. So listening requires the development of those capacities that we talked about. And here we're going to talk about what is listening. So think of listening as a skill. And we talked about these capacities as being like muscles, and we can flex these muscles. So when we listen, it's very important that we flex our muscle of empathy. Because if we don't have empathy for people, we can't really hear what they're saying. If we don't have empathy for people, we can hear their words, but we can't hear their hopes, we can't hear their fears, we can't hear their humanity. So if you talk to me about your problem and I don't have any empathy for you, I can't really hear what you're saying. And another muscle that we need to flex in addition to empathy, to truly listen, is also discipline, the ability to focus the mind and concentrate. If you talk to me about your problem, if I am unable to concentrate on what you're saying, unable to focus on what you're saying, again, I cannot really hear what you're saying if I am not able to concentrate and focus my mind on what you're saying. Another muscle that we can flex is curiosity. I can be curious about what you're saying. I can ask questions. And here, accurate understanding can become important because we need to understand context. And in certain contexts, in some contexts, some questions might be inappropriate. So understanding those contexts can also be something that can help us listen and also help us in conversation. Another capacity, another muscle that we can flex is imagination. When I told that fork story, you were probably imagining what I was saying, imagining the scene in your head, in your mind. And using our imagination to visualize what people are talking about is something that we can do when we're listening, especially when we're listening with discipline, focus, concentration, and with empathy. Now, all of these capacities we can flex, all of these muscles we can flex when we are listening. And if we had more time, I'd be able to talk about all of these. But this shows how listening is a skill, how it can connect to capacities and muscles, but also how it can connect to accurate understanding. The second skill that all known cultures find respectful is leading by example. Leading by example, not being hypocritical. So what does that mean to lead by example? So here's a story from Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi. And I'm just going to read this story about his grandfather, where Arun Gandhi talks about his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, and offers an example of the importance of leading by example and how this conveys respect. So this is again from Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi. I became friends with a boy named Anil, who was my age. Anil had a weakness for sweets that verged on obsession. He consumed more than was good for him. One day he became ill and his parents took him to the doctor. The doctor's advice was that Anil must drastically reduce the amount of sweets that he consumed. Anil's parents tried to enforce the doctor's orders. Both parents would nag Anil about not eating sweets while they themselves continued to eat sweets every day. Several weeks went by, and the parents found that Anil was continuing to eat sweets when no one was looking. They brought him to grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, with an appeal to drum some sense into him. Anil will not listen to us, his mother told grandfather. The doctor has said he should not eat any sweets, but he still consumes them on the sly. He refuses to obey us. Please speak to him. Grandfather heard the complaint patiently, and just as patiently told Anil's mother, "Come back with Anil after 15 days." Anil's mother was perplexed. All she believed grandfather had to do was tell the boy not to eat sweets. They were bad for him. Why did she have to wait for 15 days? She could not fathom this, but she was not prepared to argue with grandfather. On the 15th day, she returned. Grandfather took Anil aside and whispered into his ear. Anil's eyes sparkled. Grandfather asked him for a high five to seal their private deal, and they left. Anil's mother had no idea what had transpired, but she was skeptical. A few days later, both parents came back to grandfather utterly amazed and asked him, "How could Anil obey you so readily and not us? Tell us the secret." Grandfather explained, "It was no miracle. I asked you to come back after 15 days because I had to first give up eating sweets before I could ask him to do so. I simply told Anil that I had not eaten sweets for 15 days and that I would not eat any until the doctor allowed Anil to eat sweets. It was a simple lesson in the power of correcting by example, but how many of us practice this? We are quick to use our authority or superior physical strength to force others to do what we want them to do. And as a result, even if we are obeyed, we have not affected the kind of change that makes our lessons permanent." So leading by example, this is important at any level of human connection. And not leading by example, hypocrisy can cause conflict at any level, can cause disrespect at any level. If you are in a workplace and your boss gives you a lecture on being honest, what if your boss is the most dishonest person that you know? That will actually come across to you as disrespectful. You will most likely think, who is this person to lecture me on being honest when this person is so dishonest? But what if your boss is very honest, has high integrity, and then your boss talks about integrity, being honest? You will perceive that discussion much, much differently. And this can also cause conflict at the international level. When governments profess ideals and they don't live up to those ideals, or they directly contradict those ideals through government policies, such as hypocritical foreign policies, this can also cause conflict and convey disrespect on an international level when governments contradict their own values and don't lead by example. So in the Army, you learn that if you are going to enforce standards as a leader, you have to lead by example. If you are going to enforce any standards, you have to do those things. You have to practice what you preach. And I have given talks to students in elementary school, and I have asked them, can you name examples where adults are hypocritical? And they will go on for an hour. We all remember being children, and adults tell us to do things, and they don't do those things themselves. So not leading by example, hypocrisy is something that even a very young child can pick up on and notice and feel disrespected by. The third skill that conveys respect in all known cultures is speaking to people's potential. Speaking to people's potential means speaking to people as if they have worth, not talking to people like they are worthless, and trying to summon their humanity and speak to them in a way that brings forth their full potential. So when I talk to audiences, I will often say, raise your hand if you like being talked to like you're worthless. So speaking to people's potential, speaking to people as if they have worth, not talking to people like they are worthless. And all of these are skills that require practice. And they exist along a spectrum. And we can become better and better at listening as a skill and flexing those muscles and also implementing greater understanding. We can become more and more skilled at leading by example. And we can become more and more skilled at speaking to people's potential. It's like any other skill, it takes practice and we can learn how to cultivate these skills. Now, these three elements of universal respect, these three skills that convey respect in all known cultures, we call them the three elements of universal respect: listening with empathy, leading by example, speaking to people's potential. These three skills, these three elements also build shared trust. If you are in any kind of human relationship, friendship, community, when people listen with empathy and other capacities, and they lead by example, and they speak to people's potential, that will build trust in that group or in that relationship. And think about how you would want to be treated. Would you want someone to listen to you with empathy and with concentration and focus that emerges from discipline? Would you want someone to listen to you even with conscience? Another capacity we can flex when we listen. Do you want people to lead by example or to be hypocritical in terms of how they relate to you? Do you want people to speak to your potential, speak to you as if you have worth, or talk to you like you're worthless? So think about what would make you trust people more. If people listened to you with empathy and other muscles, other capacities, if they led by example and weren't hypocritical, if they spoke to your potential, didn't talk down to you like you were worthless, you would have more trust toward them. And the more people in a community or in a relationship who practice these skills, the more trust you can build, the deeper that root of shared trust can grow as people practice these skills in any kind of human group. And think about how this could change things, not just in terms of communities and workplaces and schools, but also on a national level and also on an international level. If more people were taught how to do this, and as I mentioned before, many people today are taught the opposite. So think about what the future could be if people were trained and educated in how to practice and use these skills. So thank you very much for listening, and please visit peaceliteracy.org to learn more about these skills and all of the elements of peace literacy. Thank you.